1950. In the beginning, they said, let's give this beautiful planet a creature with free will and see what he does with it. And believe me, they're not very happy with what we're doing with it.
It was their choice.
Yes, just to see what they would do with it. And we were supposed to be a perfect species that would never get sick and never die. It was like in a virtual Garden of Eden was what it was supposed to be like. And everything was developing along and going very well until something happened to spoil the experiment. A meteorite hit the Earth. And what it did, it brought a bacteria that was not was alien to the Earth. And the bacteria, for the first time, developed disease to the Earth, and it contaminated the growing species. And at first, there was a lot of sorrow and sadness. They said, what do we do now? They went back to the councils, and there are councils over solar systems, galaxies. They're the ones that set the rules. They went back to the council, and they said, what are we going to do now? Our experiment is ruined. Do we just destroy everything and start over again, or do we let it continue developing on its own? It was decided that so much time and effort had been put into it to allow it to continue to develop.
And monitor it maybe every once in a while.
And this will help people understand what the ETs have been doing up into our modern time. It's not invasive. It's not negative. They've been keeping track of us and watching us because we're their children. And they said the human species is so important, it must not perish. So the idea that they're here to take over the world doesn't fit into this at all. It's just misunderstandings of people. But along the way, as the species began to develop, it needed different inventions along the way, different things to help the species go, like the invention of fire, the being taught how to plant. Now, every culture in the world has the legend of the culture bringer. They always have someone, the corn woman with the Indians, someone who brings agriculture, someone who brings fire.
Some kind of knowledge to them.
And they always come in the legends from the sky or from across the waters.
That's true.
These are the ones who came to teach the developing species, and they lived among them, and because they could live as long as they wanted, they were treated as gods, and these are the legends of the gods that have come down through us through all the cultures, where the ETs living among them, teaching them the different things. And I asked them, the Star Trek, the Star Trek directive of non-interference
yes,
is very, very real. It's not fiction. Once this was set up, give them free will, you cannot interfere in the development of a civilization.
No matter what.
No matter what, except there is one exception, and that's what I'll get into during the show. This is why they had to take action. But you cannot develop into the development of the species. You cannot interfere. So all they could do was watch and see what we were doing and shaking their heads. But I said, well, what about when you come and give them fire, you give them corn, the planting? Every time something was needed, someone would come and give it to the human race.
Sure.
I said, isn't that interference? They said, no, we give them to them one time as a gift.
They see that as advancement, I would guess.
Yes, advancement of the species. What you do with it is up to you. That's the free will. And often they said the way the human species is, you would turn it into a weapon or you would turn it into something it was not intended to be. And I said, couldn't you come back and say, you're not doing it right? They said, that's interference. So that's the difference between giving them something and then interfering. But now we have developed to the point they can't come and live among us anymore.
Why not?
Well, because, they would be noticed. They would be interfering in that way if somebody would know they were here.
All right.
So if it's time for an invention or an advancement to come into our history, the idea is put into the atmosphere so that whoever thinks of it will be the one to invent it. And it's spread all over the world. So, you always hear about many people working on the same invention at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't care who invents it as long as it is invented in the timeline. So that's how we're getting our information now.
So they basically put this information out into the universe, basically, and let it grow.
People get a brilliant idea in the middle of the night, a dream, or all of a sudden an insight. And I've talked to many people all over the world who are working on free energy. And it's all the same devices, but it's as though they're all picked up the idea at one time. This kind of thing. If it's meant to be, it will happen in our